But one I mentioned, when if he says Amar Ani, okay, so he's saying an opinion. So he's saying an opinion, right? And then there's another place where he describes the Yam Suf. Now the Yam Suf is in actually two places, and I think Rashi understood that it ran from east to west. Meanwhile, there's a whole Sinai Peninsula. It goes up on one side of the Sinai Peninsula and it goes up on the other side. The other side is to Eilat, right? So the Torah describes the Bnei Israel in the Midbar. So first they're crossing the Yam Suf, and then later in the Midbar, they come across the Yam Suf again. So we know from the maps that we look at that
there's the Gulf of Aqaba.
Pardon me?
One's the Gulf of Suez, one's the Gulf of Aqaba.
That's right. So Rashi, to me, clearly never saw a map of the area. He thought that that Yam Suf ran from east to west. The shores ran from east to west. So anyway, there's like three places that tell me that Rashi never saw a map of Eretz Yisrael or the Middle East.
And he didn't have access to the internet.
No, but even a map, an ancient map, he didn't see.
That's right.
If it existed, I don't even know if it existed back in the days. Yeah.
We can't say back in the day because that makes it sound like we were around.
Yeah.
Back in those days. Okay, Gavaltic. Now we learned yesterday a very interesting halacha about you're not supposed to delve into much teiches and or if it's a Savik, leave it. So the Noda Yehuda was always asked, like many Rabbanim today are always asked, can I take this boy as a son-in-law? He has the same name as me. So the Noda Yehuda, and there's a Rabbi Yehuda Chassid that says you shouldn't. So the Noda Yehuda always answered that Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, there's certain things in his Savah that are connected to Gemara. So because of that, it's clear that he wasn't posketing that way. He was just telling his children to follow those customs. But Avada, it's not binding on all of Klal. And then he says, I don't understand. I've been asked hundreds of times, can I take an Eidim who has the same name as me? But nobody in my career, everybody ever called me to ask me, can I take this guy as an Eidim, even though he's an Amar, he's not a Talmud Chacham, and the Gemara says terrible things about that. So why isn't anybody asking me about that question? And everybody's busy asking me about the Yehuda Chos. So that's what the Noda Yehuda said. What? Okay, Gavaltic. So what we were up to now is we were talking about the borders of Bavel regarding the halacha of that Bavel is soilus tekiah, that everybody within those borders are definitely of a pure yichus. So we talked about a bridge that when Shmuel's time was there, that bridge was further south, and that's why it was mutter. It was an area where the yuchsim were still pure, but the Persians moved it further north, I think, and now it's no longer within that range. And since it's no longer in that range, if you're near that bridge, people living near that bridge are not necessarily within the borders of Bavel. So all that happened is the bridge moved, but it's not like anything changed underground. It's also very important to mention, which I think I mentioned yesterday, is how could Abaye curse out those who followed the psak of Shmuel and of Rav, who says that the borders go to here? How could Abaye curse out Rav and Shmuel? So Abaye lied. So the Mefarshim tell us Abaye lived later than Shmuel. Of course, in Shmuel's days, those areas were still very pure in their yichus, but things started to degrade. In Abaye's times, he cursed people in his times who were still following the borders of Shmuel, because Abaye knew that those outlying areas started to slip and allow Psula Yichus to marry in. Okay, Zok to Gemara. Omar Abaye Reb Yosef, Lahagi to the press on the south side, on the southeast side, Atecha, until where does the soiless, the area where anyone there has pure yichus, until where does it go? Omar Lei, My daitach. Why are you asking me that question? There's only one city in that area that you're focusing on, and you want to know if it's within or without the boundaries of the Silas Nakia. It must be Mishum Beiram because of the city of Beiram. I want you to know the most choshev people of Pumbedisa who are in Bavel proper, they marry people from Beiram. So Beiram is definitely a city that's within the borders of the Silas Nakia. Just like we have the machlokes here in Yuchsin, where does the borders of Bavel extend to? We know there's a halacha hamevi get b'medinas hayam tzarich loimer b'fani nechtav b'fani nechtav. Only in Eretz Yisrael and in Bavel, if the get is written in Eretz Yisrael, or if the get is written in Bavel, then you don't have to say b'fani nechtav b'fani nechtav because either there's shayaris between l'kaimoy, there'll be shayaris going back and forth, so there'll be edim between l'kaimoy, or it's because they're bekiim in l'shema. So there's two separate reasons. It's not a question of yichus. So therefore, when we're discussing the question of yichus, we're going to outline the borders the way the Gemara described until now. But as far as when you have to say b'fani nechtav and when not, that has a different set of rules. If Yosef Amar machlokes liyuchsin, the machlokes is only liyuchsin aval agitin divrei hakoil ad arba tinyana de gishra. Arba tinyana de gishra. It's a place, it's an agam shel konim, v'arava shekorin usha. It's a swamp. There was near the bridge, there was some type of swamp, there are two swamps. And by the second swamp, that is the border, Lagabe Bekim Bel Shema and Shiorish Mitzuyah. Omar Rami Bar Abba, Chavil Yama, the city of Chavil Yama, is Techelta the Bavel. Teles is a royal garment. The dye of Tcheles was only used for royalty. So Chavil Yam is like the royalty of Bavel. It's the best of Bavel. And Shunya Vagovia, I guess, were neighborhoods in the city, were Tchil to the Chavil Yam. So if you were able to find a shidduch from either Shunya or Vagovia, you knew that the yichus there was pristine. Ravina Amar Af Tzitzura. Tzitzura as well was a place where we could be reassured that the yichus was pristine. Tanya Mihochi, Chanan ben Pinchas Omer, Chavil Yama, Techilta de Bavel, Shunya Vagovia Vitzura, Techilta de Chavil Yam. So we see a raya from a brisa to that fact. Omer Papa, but Idna, and nowadays, there are kusim that are mixed in. In other words, things have degraded and it's no longer pristine. Velohi, now we're about to learn a fascinating line. Velohi, you know what it was? Itzahu de boy minayu. He wanted to marry a woman from this city, Velohi Yavalei, and they wouldn't take him. So it sounds at first glance like since he was angry that they rejected him, he said that they're apostle. But Rashi brings a second shot. So let's look, Rashi. Thank you so much. Rashi, it's a bo minayu, kusiyim loynes arvobe. There were no kusim that got mixed into them. But what happened is a rumor came out of a hakol yotza aydesha shol kutzi echad isha mayhem. A kusi wanted to marry into this city. He wanted to marry a woman from the city. They rejected him. So it was a false rumor, being that they knew that there was a kusi who wanted to marry in there. That tarnished the yichus of that city. But for Yeshayim, Rav Papa Rav Papa wanted a wife from there, and they wouldn't take it. So he was rejected. He said, oh, they don't want me to probably mamzerim. It's very difficult to say that Rav Papa should have said such a thing. So let's see Rashi, and then we'll get a beautiful shot from Rabbi Yashiv, or is it Rabbi Steinman? I'm not sure if they yell Shachar to Rabbi Yashiv in what happened over here. Let's see Toshis. It's a boy Menayvel Yavalei. Look at Hotilim Las. The Yesh Mefoshim the Kayad Rav Papa. But when you hear the Chas v'Sholem Shiyala B'Daitoi Shal Oised Tzadik Hotzi Las Aleim Shaloikid. So there's two things I want to bring up. That I think Rabbi Yashiv brings up. We learned yesterday that sometimes if there's two mishpachas that are fighting, or two people that are fighting, it must be because one of them are mamzerim, and Hashem wants to protect the other mishpacha from connecting with a mishpacha of mamzerim. So our Papa wasn't being vindictive. Our Papa said, listen, it was a perfect shidduch. Everything was perfect. It didn't make sense that they would say no. It simply doesn't make sense. Could be that the Rebbe Shem was trying to protect you from mamzeris, but it wasn't trying to be vindictive. Maybe that's the unexplainable reason why we couldn't make it work. Like I said yesterday, if you ever want a shidduch for one of your children and you're pushing and they reject you, don't be insulted. Just say, you have mom's item anyway, right? Because that's what the Gemara tells us. If someone says no to you and you want them, want the mom's item, who needs them? Then if they come back and say yes, then you have a problem. Yeah, say it low. Say it low. Gewaltig. Zog the Gemara weiter. See, the Gemara always gives us a feel good. You didn't want me? I gave mom's of us it is, right? Zog the Gemara.
He said they have two children.
Yeah, the other shot is that it was a pussy tried to be mistopping with them, and it didn't work. But that's where the rumor came out that there's kusim there. Zog the Gemara, my Villian, and my Papa zu Paras the Bursi. This is Paras the Bursi. It's also the name of a place. Okay. Gewaltig. Zog the Gemara weiter. Hahu Gavra, the Amalu. A man once said, Ana min Shoit Meshut. I'm from Shoit Meshut. And if we look at the map, Shoit Meshut was north of the cities that we were talking about on the northern end of the area of Bavel that was pure for Yochsin. So let's have a look, see if I can find it. Shoit Meshut was, I'm not sure if you could see in my map here, but Shoit Meshut is identified here. Let me get it to focus. Okay, Shoit Meshut is all the way up here. So we were discussing Rav and Shmuel of Akar Blanca, or if it's the bridge of Pras. Then you have a city called Dekira, and even north of that is Shoit Meshut. That all the way north, which seems to be out of the boundaries that we said you can assume is for sure kosher yichus. This is way out. So this fellow comes along and says, I am from Shoit Meshut. Ben Hanaharis, Zok to Gemara, Amad Rabbi Yitzchak Nafchal Ragla, Amar Shoit Meshut, Ben Hanaharis Oimedes, is in between the rivers. And it doesn't mean the two rivers of Bavel, because that's Pashut. Ben Hanaharis Oimedes Mayhava. What is the mile of that? Ben Hanaharis. I'm sorry, it is between the two rivers, it's between the Chidekel and the Pras. And Hamabukah said in the name of that Ben Hanaharis is considered Kegoyla L'Yochsin, it's considered like Goyla, which means it is pure, it is pure. Where exactly is it? It's northwest of Idikira, which is way out of the bounds that we discussed. Which is further south. In fact, the northern border of the pure area was much lower. It was Mavarta de Gizma. But there was a strip of land that went not along the riverbed, but further inland, that went north and then turned to the west, which took in that coastal town of Shoit Meshut, even though the land below it was not considered part of Bavel. But that little area, that little strip of land, the Shoit Meshut and Shoit Meshut itself were still pure. Amar Vikabar Avin, Amar Chananel, Amar Rav. Chalazon Nahavan, the area called the river Nahavan, have Arei Kegoyel Yuchsin, is also pure. Amalei Abai said, Lo Shetzitzulei, don't listen to him, don't accept this psak from Rav Ikabar Avin. You know why? Because Yavama Hui the Naflalei. Awesome. A Yavama fell to him. So he's the Negev, so he's trying to make it mutter. Again, that's very schwer to say.
Like we had yesterday.
So Chaim, it's like we had yesterday, where you cannot rely on a psak if the psak was made when it was negated to the Talmud Chacham. You can only rely on a psak if it made the psak independently, and then it became negated.
If it came later, after,
then it's not a problem, right? So Rabbi Ika answered him back, Alto Didi, this is not my psak. The Rab Chananel, I said it over in the name of Rab Chananel. Also Shailuha the Rab Chananel. So they asked Rab Chananel, is this city good of Chalos Nahavin? Amalahu, Hachi Amarav, Chalos Nahavin, Harei Kagoy Yosin. It is pure. Upligid Rababa Bakana, Dover Rababa Bakana, Maidich. It says in the pasuk, Vayanchem. This is talking about Sancheiriv. After he put the 10 Shvatim into Golos. Vayanchem, where did he put them? I want to see it from the Torah because I hate butchering the words. Vayanchem b'chalach u'v'chavar nahar goizon v'orei modah. It is bachlach. There's not a lamed there. There's a base. Bachalach. Vayinachem b'chalach u'v'chibur nahar goizon v'orei modah. Chalach. Where is chalach? Zu chalosin. That's the pasuk that we're talking about. So if it's the place where the Sacher mixed everybody up and put them there, that's surely a place where there were psulim mixed in. As Rashi says, as the Gemara will say in a second, b'chulin l'psul, a chaver zu hadayiv, nargoizin is ginzik, zu ginzik, or a modei zu chemdon the chaver for amullah zu nahavin the chaver. So you see, we're talking about this area. My chaver, what do we mean by the areas around Nahavin? It includes Krach, Mushki, Husky, and Rumki. So the V'chulam Psul means Kalmokim Shagolu Ashvatim Zakrashi, Nitmu of the Gechavim Bivnei. Wherever the Shvatim were placed, Goyim mixed into their yiches, even though it's not a mamzer, but pogum you have, it's still pogum. So these places are definitely not pristine yichus of bubble. At first, we think maybe Mushki, which we're saying here is not good yichus, is the same city as Mushkini. But frankly, you can't say that because the Amar Abchibar Avin Amar Shmuel, Mushkini, Harehi Kigoyla Yuchsin. So which means it's a good place. There's two separate cities. There's Mushki and Mushkini. Now we're talking about the Nevuah, the dream that Daniel had, and he saw 4 chayas. So he was describing the different chayas that he saw. So one was a bear, utlas al alin befuma. There were 3 ribs, I guess that it tore out of some other body, in its mouth. Ben shina, between its teeth. Bepuma means it's inside your mouth. Ben shina means it's sticking out of your mouth. So the question is, what are these cities referring to? These are cities. It's referring to these cities from the Persian Malchus. Sometimes Persia controlled them, and sometimes Persia didn't control them. So they were, I guess, border areas that came into Persian control sometimes, and the Persia was very brutal. They were a very brutal regime. They were compared to this wild bear. Sometimes they had control over these cities and sometimes not. I saw another chaya, that's like a bear. This pasuk is before the pasuk we just learned, because in the description of the bear, it talked about these 3 ribs in the mouth. So Tani Rabbi Yosef, who are these? Which nation is the doiv referring to? Eli Parsi, and these are referring to Persians. They fresh like a bear. They're fat, they're big, fat, blubbery like a bear. And they grow their hair like a bear. A bear never sits still. Even if it's chained down, it's always pacing back and forth. Rabbi Ami Kiavikachazi Parsa, the Rachiv, when he would see Persians riding, Omar, he would say, Hanu Doiva Night. That's a wandering bear. Omar Ava Levi. Now Levi was a person who always made mishalom. He always helped people understand things by comparing them to other things. He helped people visualize things by giving them comparisons. So someone asked him, Hareini Parsium. So Rebbe asked Levi, show me what the Parsium are. Omar Lei, Doimim L'chayolos shall Beis David. The chayolos of Beis David were so powerful and so strong. If you remember, the Navi said they could rip a tree out. So that's how big and strong the Persians were. Hareini Chavrin, show me the Chavrin. The Chavrin were the most vile, most brutal sect in Persia. So they were like worse than Persians. They were really bad. They look like Malachei Chavala. I guess when you're speaking to Rebbe, you could use Malachei Chavala as an example, and you would expect Rebbe to know what you're talking about. Hareini Yishmaelim, Zakt Gemara, what do you Diamond L'Seir Mishal Beis HaKisei? They look like the Shadim of the Beis HaKisei, and the Meforshim are Masbir. I think the Mashal says that what does it mean Diamond L'Seir Mishal Beis HaKisei? The Arabs are Molei Niyuf, they're full of znus, and znus comes from a dirty place, and that's why the Sirma of the Beis HaKisei is a place of dirt and smell and odor and filth, and that's the environment that a noif is in. And Hareini Talmidei Chachamim Shababavel, which are pure and clean, Doimim LaMalachi Asharis, they're dressed in white. So the Seir Mel Beis HaKisei are dressed in black, representing filth, and the Talmidei Chachamim are dressed in white, representing cleanliness and purity. They're black and white. Yeah. When Rebbe died, he expressed a tremendous amount of Ruach HaKodesh. And he started revealing a lot of secrets to the nation. Omar Humanya, Tika Bavel, there's a city of Humanya. Umlia, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Kula Amainoim. They are all Amainoim. They're apostle yichus. You're not allowed to marry into them. Amoni lo yove v'cholachem. Misgaria Ika Bavel, there's a city called Misgaria. Kula de Mamzeir. They're all Mamzeir. So I guess this wasn't all in his lifetime, and he wanted to make sure that they wouldn't get mixed into Klal Yisrael. Birka Ika Bavel. In that city, there's some lowlifes who live there that create mamzerim, so I would stay away from anybody in that city as well. Shnei achim yesh shemachlifin nishoseim zelazeh. Birta de Satya Ika Bavel. There's another place called Birta de Satya, and today hayoim saru me'achrei hamok. Today they became apikushim. They turned away from the Rebbeinu Shalom because years ago the Akve Pera Bakavri Bishabata. One day they had it was called a beaver. It was called a little pond of water, and for some reason it got swelled over, overflowing with fish. So it was like shooting fish in a barrel. It was very, very good time to go fishing. And on Shabbos, they all went fishing on Shabbos. They all decided on Saturday afternoon it's a good time to go fishing. So Rabbi Yosy put the whole city into Cherem, and that caused Vishtamu, then they went out to Derech Ganze. So this is brought down halacha l'maisa. It's actually a shayla halacha l'maisa. Are you allowed to put somebody in Cherem if it's going to push him over the edge and make him completely go off the derech? So they bring a raya from this Gemara that you're allowed to, because Rabbi Achi did it, even though they went out to derech. That's as far of the Achron who says that you can't. There's a city called Akra, the city of Agma. Adabar Ava Yeshba. And Adabar Ava, the great tzaddik, Adabar Ava is in that city. Hayoim, today is the day that Yoshev Bechekoi Shel Avram. He's sitting in the lap of Avram, so that could mean today he died. So Rashi says, yes, could be means he died today, but then Cain ain't there of Ada Gemara. It cannot be the Rabbad of the Gemara, who we know was around so much later after the death of Rebbe. Zokt Rashi, maybe it means something else. But near the Yoshev Bechekoi Shel Avram Avinu means Shenichlas L'Bris Milah. Today in this city, Rab Ada got his bris, and then Vizer Rab Ada Baba, and then it could be our Rab Ada Baba, because Sheherach Yom Harbe, we can say he lived a very, very long time. Mishareis Rebbe Adoris Achroinim till the later generations. Bimei Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Kedama Bavasra. Zok to the Gemara. Hayoim Noilad Rabbi Yehuda Bavel. Today, Rabbi Yehuda was born in Bavel. The Amar Mar. So these are all the nevuos that Rabbi said when he was at the last moments of his life. The Amar Mar. Mishamesh Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva died. Kishamesh Rabbi Akiva, Noilad Rabbi. Kishamesh Rabbi, Noilad Rabbi Yehuda. Kishemesh Rabbi Yehuda noiled Rava, and Kishemesh Rava noiled Ravashi. Until he's replaced by another tzaddik, he will not be taken away from the world. So there's an overlap. It's not even instantaneously happen at the same time. First, we have the refuah, then we get the makkah. Shenemar, it could have said v'zorach ubo hashemesh, but it says v'zorach hashemesh ubo hashemesh. We learn from here it's actually kavsa shimsha shel Eli. Before Eli HaKohen died, zorach shimsha shel Shmuel. Shmuel already was a novi. So Shmuel Armasi. Shenemar v'ner lakim terem yichva u'Shmuel shoychev. Tziva Hashem Yaakov Sevivav Tzarav. Rav Yehuda Amar Kigoyin Humna Lefum Nahira. Zok Rashi. Tziva Hashem Yaakov Sevivav Tzarav. Tzarav Shal Yusayvivim Oisam Ba'artzam. It's referring to the enemies that surrounded Klal Yisrael. Nothing new. We still have that today. They caused more trouble to Klal Yisrael than anybody else. They were the bad neighbors of Yerushalayim. Hashem commanded that they should be around Klal Yisrael even when we're in Golus. That's what we said earlier. Rebbe said that Humanya is a city that's full of Aminoim. In other words, they're right there around us. Even when we're in Bavel, we have to suffer with these miserable neighbors. Maybe that explains why our crazy government let in all these anti-Semites, Jew haters, Jew killers from Hamas, and they were let into the United States as well. Maybe it's because of this Gemara, that wherever we go, even in Golis, Hashem's going to make sure that our enemies are close by.
This week in the past.
The what? Okay. So now we have a very interesting nevuah with was it I think it's Yecheskel Hanavi with Yecheskel Hanavi. It's talking about two players here, and we need to know, are they good guys or are they bad guys? Saying my nevuah, Platyahu ben Benayo makes this person Platyahu ben Benayo died. The epel al panai, and I fell on my face, the ezek, and I cried kol gadol. So he's mourning over the death of this Platyahu. I said, Aha Hashem Elokim, how are you taking this man? To Rav Shmuel. There's a machlekes Rav Shmuel, if he was crying, why you punished him? Or if he was crying, why did you let him die a natural death? You should have had him brutally murdered, tortured. One darshan is that that Platyahu was a good guy, and the Chadam al was a bad guy. And the complaint of Yecheskel was, why did you let him off so easy? He should have died a brutal death. Mandam l'toiva. If you learn it l'toiva, it's kiha the istandra de Meishan. Meishan, remember, Meishan was a city that we said is Lamisa, right? Remember we said 2 blocks ago when we were discussing different cities. So if I'm not mistaken, we said that Meishan is Mace, or Meishan is a glacis. What was the story of Meishan? Let's see if I can find it. We had it right over here. We were talking about the different cities. Maybe it was even earlier than this. It was yesterday. Was it over here?
It's on the map.
Oh, here it is. Here it is. Meishan Misa. Bavel Beria, Meishan Misa. So Meishan, we know, is full of bad people, right? That's what Papa said in the name of Rav. That Meishan is all of Misa. So they're full of mamzerim. So let's talk about this city called Meishan. There was an Istandadra, he was the officer of Meishan, and he happened to have been the son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar. Yod Istandra, the Meishan, Chassid Nebuchadnezzar. He was the item of Nebuchadnezzar. Shalachle, he sent the message to Nebuchadnezzar. You captured so many Jewish captives, Michulahai Shavya the ISIS law. Come on, Shveleben. Lashadis law. You didn't send anyone to us. Why don't you send me some free labor? I also can use some free labor to do work in the city. How come you're hogging up all the captives? You just made $1 million. You just won the lottery. So I want to give me a piece of the action. So what happened? The Kohen that you have all these captives. So boy lishtur leimi Yisrael. So Nebuchadnezzar decided he wanted to take some of the Jewish captives and send them to Mesha. And Platyahu came to his rescue. Platyahu was a Yid, and he spoke up. Amarle Platyahu b'nayo. He said this to Nebuchadnezzar. Anande chashvinon neikum mikamach. You've captured us, but you also captured our slaves. So we're more choshev than our slaves. So you're the king. You should keep us. Neikum mikamach. Keep us here. The Avdin, our slaves that you captured with us, Neiz de lahosam, send them there. So basically, he saved Klal Yisrael from being sent to Meshan, which wouldn't have been good. So Zog to Gemara of Amar Navi. So Yechezkel was saying, and now Platyahu died. He died young. Amar Navi, Misha Asa Taiva b'Yisrael Yomus b'Chatzi Yomav. A person who did a Taiva for Klal Yisrael, he saved them from being sent to Meshan. He's a person that should die b'Chatzi Yomav. So that's Darsha the Taiva that Yechezkel was mourning over the death of Platyahu. Mandam l'ra, this is not for the faint of heart, this Gemara. The Chsiv, Yechezkel said in Nevuah, V'tavi Yosy el shar beis Hashem akadmoini. The Malach took me to the gates of the Beis Hamikdash, Hapoina Kadima, that point to the Marav. So if you're looking in to the front of the Beis Hamikdash, your back is facing the east and you're facing the west. V'ine v'pesach hashar, at the gate of the Beis Hamikdash, Eshrim v'chamisha ish, there were 25 people there. The Arab Besoicham, amongst them was a Yazniah ben Ezer. But we're going to focus on the next fellow, there's Platyahu ben Benayo. He was there as well. Sorry, they were from the leaders. What were they doing there in front of the Beis Hamikdash? I was taken in to the Chatzar. V'nei Pesach Heichal Hashem beina ulam uveid hamizbeach. The opening to the Heichal between the ulam and the Mizbeach, who were there? Ke'esrim v'chamisha ish. There were 25 people there. Achirayim el Heichal Hashem. Their backs were facing the open door of the Beis Hamikdash. Ufaneim kedma. They were looking towards the Mizrach. Mimashma shenemer upaneim kedma. If the Navi tells us that they're facing the east, Eini idea shacharem klapi ma'ariv. Can I not on my own figure out that their backs were klapi ma'ariv? Why did the Navi tell us explicitly that their backs were facing the Beis Hamikdash? They pulled their pants down and they defecated towards the Beis Hamikdash. The Ka'amar Navi. So this Platyahu was a villain, Ebazai. The Ka'amar Navi Misha Asa Hara Hazois B'Yisrael Yamas HaMutasai. Someone who did such a disgusting, horrible violation of the Kiddushin of Beis Hamikdash, such a person should die peacefully in his bed. He should have a violent death. Zok Gemara Testayim the Shmuel the Amar Lara. Let's bring a ride that Shmuel, who darshans that Platyahu was the bad guy, and he wasn't the guy who prevented the Yidden from going to Mesha. Why? The Amar Abchir Bar Abed Amar Shmuel Mushkani, the city of Mushkani, Harehi Kugoyla Yuchsin. Mushkani is pure, but Mishon Loy Chashula and Mishon were not concerned. Loy Mishum Abdus, but Loy Mishum Amzeres. We're not worried about any Mamzerim being there. The only problem with the Yichus in Meishan is that the Kahanim there like Pidu al Grushos. So there may be a Chalolis there. So maybe you can marry Kahanim there, but Avada they're kosher. So that tells us that Meishan wasn't that. So it can't be the pshat that he sent Avodim to Meishan, because if he sent all Avodim to Meishan, then they would be Mamzerim or they would be Pekumim. But from Shmuel's comment here, you see that there were no avodim sent to Meishan, and therefore they're not pegumim. So that's why it makes sense to say that Shmuel learns like the second shot. So maybe Shmuel says, one second, I'm making a mistake. So we want to bring a raya that Shmuel said Lara. That's right, like the second shot. That Shmuel said the Tova like the first shot. But if it's like the first shot, how could he say that there are no psula yuchsin in Meishan, only chalolim? There's avodim there. There would have been mamzerim there as well. Shmuel Talei The Amar Hamafker Avda Yotzle Cheres V'Tzarch Get Shichra. The halacha is, Shmuel said, if you're mafker your evet, you give up your mominus shabai, automatically the Yeridea parts of him, meaning that he's not Mechliv and Mitzvahs and Gantin, that he can't marry a Bas Yisrael, that evaporates. The Yeridea Isser on the Neved is contingent on someone owning him his Choshen Mishpat part. So when you're mafker your evet, it dissipates, it dissolves the Choshen Mishpat kinyan you have in him. Shmuel, that automatically makes him Oiseved. So when they told Nebuchadnezzar, send our avodim, they're like being mafker their avodim at that point. So now they're regular Yidden. So really, it was regular Yidden that were sent out to Meshan, so it's lav dafka psul yichus. Shenemar kol eved ish miknas kesef. The pasuk says, like Abba Korban Pesach, every eved ish miknas kesef. So we darshan, and this we went in Gittin, eved ish v'lo eved isha. Are you telling me only if it's eved of a man, not eved of a woman? An eved is only in the status of eved, like Abba Yisrael Vehet, like Abba Manga Bas Yisrael, if his bailim has financial ownership of him. Because he was mafker him, ain't kari eved. You know, there's something special about dying peacefully in bed and not being gunned down. Every Hamas operative knows that now. There's a very famous story with Rabbi Aaron Kotler. The match with Rabbi Aaron Kotler was Rabbi Aaron Kotler. During the war, there were yeshiva bachim that were trapped in Italy, and he needed to get them out, needed to save them. And the only person he thought that would be able to save them, there was a big Italian mafia boss in Jersey. I think his name was Tony Soprano. And Rabbi Aaron felt that if they spoke to him, they would be able to get him to. They would be able to get him to save these boys. So he prepared 2 big briefcases full of cash, tons of cash, and they made an appointment, him and Irving Bunim, and they met him, and they explained to him what they needed. And they told him, we need you to get them safe passage out of Italy. Italy right now is very dangerous for a Jew. And they gave him a briefcase. He pops it open, it's full of cash, and he goes, ah. So they thought, wow, there's like $100,000 in here. In those days, it's not enough for him. So they pulled out the other briefcase. So that looked at him like, it's a lot of money. Like, why is it good enough? He says, I don't want your money. I want to help the rabbi. I got it taken care of. But I want the rabbi to give me a blessing. So Irving Bunin tells our Baron, der Scheigitz will a bruche. So the story goes, the Baron said, so I'll pike it behind me. No, well, let me tell you the story. I'll pike it behind me. So Irving Bunin had to translate that in a politically correct fashion, so that it wouldn't infuriate the Italian. So he said, the rabbi is wishing you that you should die natural death of old age like an animal. So he said, okay, very good. About 30 years later, after a Baron had already passed away, a big limo pulls up to Lakewood and says, I'm looking for, and the Italian guy, a slick Italian guy gets out, says, I'm looking for Rabbi Kotler. So they call it Schneur, because Baron is no longer alive. And he told Schneur, I want you to know, in the last 20 generations, every single one of my ancestors were gunned down. My father just died at 85, peacefully in his sleep, from old age. And he told us that the reason why is because of Rabbi Kotler's blessing. I'm coming, I want such a blessing. So Rabbi Schneur says, I'm not my father. So what did you hear the story of?
He saved the book.
What? Yeah, he saved the book, yeah. He must have saved the book, otherwise he wouldn't have gotten the bruche. Amar Vidam Shmuel. So Zudiv Reb Meir. All this that we're discussing is the words of Reb Meir. We're only in Bovel. Or do we have this purity of yichus? The Chum say, Kol Artzois, all the lands, the Cheskes Cheres Hein Lendos. So that opens it all up. That means everywhere in Chutz La'aretz, there would be purity. Zog to Gemara, Amemer Shari Le Rafuna Bar Noson, Leminsav Itza Mechuzaisa, from Mechuza. And that's not in the boundaries that we discussed today and yesterday. Omler Bashi Madad, why would it be that way? It must be Damar Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Zudiv Reb Meir, Avachacham Mayrim, Kol Artzois, Bechazaka, Becheskes Kasher Sheinamdes. But how could you pass in that way? I Uber Rav Kahana loy masneachi, Uber Rav Papa loy masneachi, Uber Rav Zed loy masneachi. Filu hachi loy kiblu minay. He didn't accept that, and he was mekel. You know why? Shum de shmielei Rabbi Svid in Nahardah. You heard it from a different Rabbi Svid. Rabbi Svid of Nahardah who said that, in fact, we pass on like Rabbi Yosy, that all of Golios was left pure. Taner Rabbanan, Mamzeri Unesini, Taharim Lo Asadlave Div Rabbi Yosy. Mamzerim and Nesinim Lo Asadlave, when Mashiach comes, they will become Tar. Rabbi Meirim ain't Tarim, they're not Tar. Amal Rabbi Yosy, and there's a machlokes for showing them if this means identified Mamzerim or Nesinim, or if it means mixed in and we're not sure who they are. So Amal Rabbi Yosy, how could you say they're not going to become mutter? Amal Rabbi Meir, Kishu Omer Mikol to Moiseichem, Umikol Gilulechem, that's what I'm attire you from. The Loimin Amamzeres. Amal Rabbi Yosy, Kishu Omer Atar Eschem, it's the pasuk repeats Atar Eschem, have the Omer Afmin Amamzeres. So there's a machlokes if the pasuk says that there's going to be tahara from the Mamzeres. So Bishlam Rabbi Meir, Bishlam Rabbi Meir that they will not have that tahara. I need to see if that's why the pasuk says Vayeshev Mamzer B'Ashdod. It's talking about when Mashiach comes, the Mamzer is going to be put into an isolated place in Ashdod, which wasn't even captured by Yeshua. That's where they'll be placed. In other words, to keep them isolated from Klal Yisrael. El Rabbi Yosy, my Vayeshev Mamzer B'Ashdod. According to Rabbi Yosy, Elio is going to be retire everybody. So why would you need to isolate them? So to Gemara, Kidematagim Rabbi Yosef, Yasim Beis Yisrael L'Ruchtun Bar Ahon. To have a domer ba l'nechron. Rabbi Yosef was a baki in Targum Yonishem Duzil, and he darshened Vayeshev Mamzer. Mamzer is referring to all of Klal Yisrael. Why was Klal Yisrael referred to as a Mamzer? Because all our life, the guys that were always rejected, were pushed away. So it's referring to Klal Yisrael. So Yasim Beis Yisrael L'Ruchtun Bar Ayim, they'll be able to sit in their land. That they're not only going to take over all of Eretz Yisrael, they're even going to take over Ashdod, which was a Shiloh, was part of Eretz Yisrael because it was not captured in Yeshua. They're even going to have that part of Eretz Yisrael, but Lav Davke Mamzerim, because in fact there will be no more be Mamzerim. I'm Rabbi Yudam Shmuel. I love Rabbi Yosy that Eliyot is going to retire everybody. I'm Rabbi Yosy. If you love the Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, I love Rabbi Yosy. If it wasn't for the fact that Rabbi Yudam Shmuel said I love Rabbi Yosy, if Eliyahu was not going to be retired of Mamzerim, rather he's going to separate them out and reject them. When Eliyahu was going to come, they would have been mobs and mobs of Mamzerim that we have that he would be separating out of Klal Yisrael. Rashi Tzavarni Tzavar Chaburas Lashon Achar Kulerin the Lashon Maisa the Kleiler Shal Bnei Adam. It's referring to mobs of people. So therefore, if we pass like Yosy, we won't have that kerpwa. Taner Rabbanan. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Ger noisei mamzeres. A ger is a lot of Maryam mamzeres to Rabbi Yosy because Rabbi Yosy holds kal gerim lo ikri kahal, and therefore when it says lo yavi mamzer the kahal Hashem, it doesn't include the mamzer. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ger lo yisem mamzeres because a ger is considered kahal, and therefore he's not allowed to marry mamzeres. Echad ger. Echod Eved Meshuchur v'Chalal Mutorin v'Kohenes. All of these people are allowed to marry a Kohenes. A Kohen, not a Kohen. A Ger may not marry a Kohen may not marry a Geuris, but a Ger may marry a Kohenes. A Kohenes is not limited by all the rules of a Kohen. By time Rabbi Yosy, Chamisha Kalak Sivi. It says Kahal 5 times in the pasuk. Loyavi v'Kal Hashem in different places. Chad Kohanim. We want to tell you that Kohanim can't marry the Psulim, the Chad Levim. I want to tell you not only Kohanim, but Levim as well. The Chad Yisraelim, the Chad Lemishri Mamzer B'Shtuki. Want to allow a Mamzer B'Shtuki because Loyava Mamzer Vader. Because it's B'Kal Vaday Loyava, but B'Kal Safek Yavoy. So Shtuki is a Safek Mamzer, so he could marry Shtuki. The Chad Lemishri Shtuki be Yisrael, and want to allow Shtuki be Yisrael. Because he's Mamzer Vada lo Yobi Bekal, but Mamzer Safek Yobi Bekal. Kahal Geir Melo Ikri Kal. He holds Kal Geir Melo Ikri Kal, and therefore a Geir could marry a Mamzer. Rabbi Yehuda holds Kehanim Ulavim Mechat Kal Nafki. He holds that Kehanim Ulavim you learn out of one Kahal, which means you have an extra Kahal, which is referring to Geirim. Geirim is also Kahal. You have an extra Kahal to say that even Geirim may not marry a Mamzer. Let me finish. So they have an extra kal for gerim. You need a separate kal for kahanim and levim, even though they're from the same shevet. But mamzer b'shtuki b'yisrael mechat kal nafka. and therefore you have an extra kal. It's only one kal, and from there you learn both halachas. You learn with mamzer vaday hu de lo yavoy, and mamzer sofik yavoy, and the kal vaday hu de lo yavoy, and the kal sofik yavoy. So again, we have an extra kal, which Rabbi Yehuda applies to kal gerim. They're not allowed to marry mamzer. The boy say ma haninami tre kal, even if this you might need to kal. The time of Rabbi Yehuda, the reason why Rabbi Yehuda includes kahal gerim and kal is because ha kahal huka achas lachem v'lager. It's another pasuk where it says akal huka achas lachem v'lager. So you see it includes the ger and kal. The lager hagor. Rabbi Yosy huka achas hifsik ha'inyan. According to Rabbi Yosy, you can't use that because it says hakal, but then it says huka achas, so the kal is not going on the ger. Echad ger v'echad evad mshucher b'chalol mutarn v'kahanis. Okay, we better stop here because we're getting too far. So stop here. We'll be mamshech tomorrow. Everyone should have a wonderful hatzlacha today.
This Esirim or Hetairim, it goes on the ger itself or on his generation?
The child of the ger.
Yeah.
The child of the ger is Hirose really does it with Kiddushin. I don't think it's up so long. What's that? Bava Kama. So I'm not going to